they might be self-aware.
Are they self-aware? Do we need to do another episode? Is it still they might be self-aware?
I think we're kind of locked into they might be self-aware.
Well, welcome back to another episode then of They Might Be Self-Aware. I'm Hunter Powers, and I'm joined by
Daniel Bishop, and we are possibly they. We'll never tell you who they are, but could be us.
I was thinking about that the end state for this podcast that we kind of like we get automated out of it. If AI is going to automate everything, is that
that's the dream? Yeah,
is that when
everyone's
we're
just going to see a little label on the episodes from episode, maybe 70 or so forward. Just a little AI in a square. Oh, okay, yeah, they aren't even making it themselves anymore.
That's all.
I've heard the phrase "it writes itself," in regards to like, a story where the story beats are very obvious. Yeah. Maybe we get to a point where it just writes itself. We just set up a web crawler, it finds the news. It's trained on both of us, knows what to say.
There are podcasts out there that are entirely automated and are using, text-to-speech engines, and that sound pretty good. That it would fool some people. I like to think that they don't fool me, but it's not far from fooling me.
I'd listen to one of those.
They're surprisingly good. There's a couple of companies out there that are also trying to do this thing where you just tell it things that you're interested in and it will build your own podcast just for you.
That's the podcast dream, right? Like that's the apex there of I'm trying to find content very specifically for what exactly I'm into.
I know that a lot of people like that. I don't like that. I like to check into someone else's point of view. I'm not looking for you to just echo the exact things that I'm interested in back to me. I want there to be some overlap, but it's the known knowns and the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. All those boxes. I need a little bit from each of them. Although I guess
it's a slider. You just what percent do I need to agree with everything in the podcast, and then you have to train it on yourself as well, right? Because then it really knows who you are and what your whole deal is.
That's one thing that I'm surprised. I have yet to find a good podcast recommendation engine, and I don't understand why that doesn't exist. Now that I say it out loud, like we can build something.
TM. That's ours. No one else touch it.
It doesn't exist. Like I want to find new podcasts, and so you go to like the category listings, and like I don't know, and then there's like some people which it's sort of like a social networky thing where all right, well, people that you might be following here are podcasts that they're listening to, but I can tell you the podcast I listen to, and there isn't a good suggestion of you should be listening to this, and here's why you would like it, and here's and if you were going to listen to just 2 minutes of it, what 2 minutes should you listen to? Like that could all be built today. We're just giving away free $1 billion ideas on this episode.
I feel like you're describing basically the plot to the 1997 movie The Game. I'm not going to go farther into it for, I know we're way outside the realm of, you know what? No, we're outside the statute of limitations on spoilers. Do you, Hunter, mind?
I saw The Game. I own the Criterion Blu-ray.
Okay. Well, for anyone else who cares about a 25-year-old, 20-ish, whatever, movie, spoilers for the next 40 seconds or so. In the movie, right at the beginning, rich guy goes and he takes like what seems like a personality test, but a really, really long one. And it's to understand who he is and his motivations and the levers to pull on, whatever. And then the game is ultimately this thing that he's involved in, a game basically like entirely designed to enthrall him. He thinks he's being like attacked by a killer or, he's kind of being gaslit into all this wild stuff. But ultimately it turned out to be a game. What you're describing is let's use AI to truly understand a person, call it a Voight-Kampff test or the Criterion Collection, The Game, or whatever it is. But if you know enough about a person, presumably you could tailor things to their exact specifications.
Definitely recommend the movie. David Fincher directed it, Fight Club. And Social,
it's a wild
he directed
movie.
Social Network too, if you want to. If you're into techie movies, a great techie movie.
I'm starting to see kind of a through line there. Yeah. Look, before we get into all the stuff that we had today, I promised you that I had a weird idea. And I do have a weird idea, and I'm going to share it with you. So for those of you who are listening or watching, we share a lot of show notes. Hunter has no idea what I'm about to bring up. And I'm going to bring up my actual notes on it. So bring up both of my, there was a man who was named George Stratton back in the 1890s. He made upside down glasses. Some other people have replicated this kind of experiment, but basically a guy wore some glasses that made everything upside down, and I think also swapped left and right somehow. Just like weird glasses, and wore them all the time for days and days. Okay. Eventually, his brain made the switch, and he saw normally through these weird glasses, took off the glasses for a while, couldn't see normally again. Similarly, there is a YouTube series called Smarter Every Day, and in it, number 133, we'll have a link for you all. There's a guy who made a bike that when you turn the handlebars left, the wheel turns right. And he goes through how like it took him months to get to a point where he could ride this bike, because your brain kind of gets in like this rut. And I was thinking that VR seems like a really interesting possibility to do something like that. So imagine, if you will, one of those like 360-degree GoPros or something. Just glue one of those to the front of your Apple Vision Pro or your Quest 3 or whatever, and bring in the feed from left and right, like a chameleon sees, and only see the world through, we have binocular vision or whatever it's called, hunting animals, carnivorous animals, where like they have eyes toward the front of their head, and herbivores have eyes like toward the side to see out the side. What I'm thinking is, since especially like VR cameras have a bunch of, or VR headsets have a bunch of cameras on them, or just like a GoPro with the 360-degree thing, use that for days or however long it takes to like literally widen your perception of the world. I don't mean like in a metaphorical, like I'm opening my brain. I mean like literally see more than the 120 degrees of vision or whatever it is that people get. Get close to 360, full like sides of your head, chameleon eye style. I wonder if we could adapt to that. And until we had something like VR headsets, that's a literally impossible thing. Like you could have glasses that kind of like send the light off to the side, but now you could truly see out the side of your head, or have eyes in the back of your head. Like what if you got maybe it's shown to, because it's obviously going to just your two eyes. Is it in a fisheye sort of thing, or is it just to your eye amount of sight, but like in different directions? I wonder if we could adapt to it. What do you think?
So you're taking like a 180-ish view and compressing it horizontally so that it's all displayed within my field of view inside of the VR headset.
Right, because each eye, depending on the headset, has 90 degrees, 100 degrees, whatever it ends up being.
And your question is, could I get used to that so that I can navigate the world with ease and potentially even take advantage of what is, in effect, a wider field of view than my real eyes have? Would I start taking advantage of it?
Exactly. So you've got a camera on each side, and each of those eyes is seeing, whatever its perspective is. Like, do you think that your brain would get used to it?
Sure. I mean, I could also just put like two mirrors up right like here, and see behind me, and walk around with like two little like rear view mirrors strapped to my shoulders, and I'd get used to being able to see behind me.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, I guess like mirrors, optics, something you could probably work it out with a physical device, but I feel like it'd be easier with VR. I've had some other weird ideas, like what if you were to take out like a periscope style thing where just the eyes end up being like each camera, for each of the two eyes ends up like 10 feet apart or something. Would you feel like a giant? Would you have like weird depth perception stuff? Assuming that you spend the weeks wearing this and that your brain gets used to it.
Yeah, there's lots of ways to torture people.
I hadn't really thought of it from that angle.
Similar, but not the same to those things that I've seen that I thought were interesting is trying to develop additional senses. And there's like some simple ones where You basically have a little thumper motor in front of you, to the left of you, to the right of you, behind you, like around your waist. And it just thumps, let's say every 30 seconds wherever true north is. And so you start, and you don't do anything. Yeah. But the question is, like, you start, now you have this new sense that you always know where true north is.
You
and
literally
the question
sense
is,
where north is, yeah.
Do you start naturally including that in how you act within the world? And you could do something else with, like a sonar and understanding when things are approaching you from behind. Just a little like tap, 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 coming up from behind. Do you eventually just think of it as another signal as input?
Yeah. Somebody put magnets in their fingers, like weak ones or whatever, so that they could literally sense through their hands magnetic fields.
Yeah. And with Elon and all of his brain implants, again, the concept of our brains accepting new signals as if they were native signals certainly seems like a path where we're headed. And getting to the point where they're also going to accept a video signal, although it seems like everyone acknowledges that's really far away. But
I've seen the Matrix, sure.
Someplace they want to go. Yeah, seems logical. And I've had it again with the Apple Vision Pro AVP, where I've recorded video while wearing the headset. So it's basically recording exactly what your eyes see. And then I've been in another location, played back the video inside of like a very long VR session. And I forgot that I was in the other location. I thought I was in the original location where I filmed it. Just because like when you're playing back video that was shot from your eyeballs, playing it back into your eyeballs, it really does a number on your brain as far as where am I? Like
you're seeing like a memory. At that point.
You're seeing a memory. You're reliving it. And it's different than just a video because it's literally captured, from your eyeballs.
Right. You're getting your own head movements and everything in there too. Yeah. Well, so along those same lines, you mentioned Elon Musk and Neuralink. I'm sure there are other players out there, but the one guy tends to get a lot of media coverage. Elon Musk is working on a neural interface, and just recently there was a first person that got signed up for this. It's turned on. I think the first thing that the guy did, other than presumably testing it out, was start playing Civilization 6 on it. A guy who was locked in, I think quadriplegic, that sort of thing. Yeah. I think locked in is a different thing. A quadriplegic started using this basically immediately to play video games, which I think is an incredible use. In video games, usually you have some sort of body, maybe not in a Civ 6, but playing Skyrim or something. I could see that as immensely therapeutic to people who can't otherwise do these things. And that would be one of these, is that a new sense? Is that what you'd call that? Or just like an augmentative device? I'm sure there's like a medical term for these kinds of things, but I don't know. Is interacting via a computer a sense, maybe?
Well, this is different in that this is you controlling something with your brain signals versus something controlling your brain signals or sending you a new signal to process.
Okay.
Right.
And I guess use arms is not a sense.
Right. If Civilization was playing back to his brain directly, he wasn't seeing anything, then potentially it's a new sense, a new way of sensing things. But the playback mechanism is separate.
Okay, so it's just a cool thing instead of a sense, and I'm all right with that.
Yeah, but evolving to a sense, right? Because Elon eventually wants Grok and other things plugged into our brains.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I want Grok sharing my head with me personally.
It's getting a little bit better. He did release a slightly newer version, and he also released like super fun turbo mode or something. It was because it already has what's called fun mode. I don't know if you've played with it at all.
I haven't played with his Grok. There's Grok his is with a K, I think, and there's Grok with a Q. Two, unfortunately, very similarly named LLMs. I've played with one, not the other.
Yeah. It's getting better. Although that's because sort of all of the large language models are getting better right now. And in fact, in some recent testing, the reigning champ GPT-4, OpenAI's baby, has been dethroned.
Saw that. Claude 3 Opus, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And what an Opus.
I've actually been playing with it a lot. I went ahead and forked over the money to Claude.ai, which that's Anthropic is Claude. So they have a very much like ChatGPT like interface that you can use. It also is hit by people really need to focus on that interface more. So like it was way too easy for me to just be like, you know what? I'm kind of done with ChatGPT. I'm just going to move over to Claude because it's not like they organize all my prompts for me neatly. I can't even search for a prompt. In the mobile app, you can, but on the web, you can't search for a prompt. I can't see my history. I can't save them. It's just a giant pain. So I was like, okay, fine. I'll switch over to there's no lock-in. And if the only lock-in is the quality of your models, once there's a slightly better model, okay, I'll switch over. And so, yeah, I've been using Claude 3 Opus heavily over the last probably 2 weeks.
It has a little green bubble next to all the conversations. That would make you feel good, right? I'm
Isn't
just taking
the green
a
bubble
cheap
the bad
dig at
bubble?
Apple.
You don't want the green bubble.
Green bubble, blue bubble, whatever.
I want the blue
I don't
bubbles.
know.
If there was a blue bubble,
man.
I'm in. Like I'm sold. I'd pay $1,600 for that.
There you go. Yep.
That
thank
blue
you.
bubble.
But yeah, so Opus 3, there are benchmarks that all of these different companies making different LLMs come out with, some standardized things, and everyone's kind of learning how to train for the test at this point. But those tests are pretty good at, like, this is what a human would be writing under these kinds of circumstances. So we've got that. We also have the head-to-head leaderboards, which I know we've talked about in the past, and I think that's kind of where we're starting to see in at least X% of the time, like this is doing better than the lead GPT-4 or some of the GPT-4s because there have been multiple iterations of it. Regardless, to have anyone up at that highest echelon besides just OpenAI is really, really exciting. I do wonder, though, just like companies can train for certain tasks, can you optimize for people? I mean, ultimately, that's like what an LLM is trying to do, right? Is respond with text that would be pleasing to a person to hear.
Yeah.
That's not cheating, right? That's literally just making a better model. You want to make something that in as many cases as possible does better, whether it be coding or creative writing or other uses that people are, chatting with their chatbots about. How about you? In the cases that you've used, does this at least compare to GPT-4?
Well, it's better in the cases that I've used. That's why I've switched over to it for now, at least. They also have a horrible interface, or as good of an interface as ChatGPT.
Okay,
so
just as bad. Great.
But here's the thing so I'm using it primarily in a software development context. I'm writing code, and I'm using it to answer a question, figure out why something's not working, explore a new library. Yeah, I guess those are the basic use cases. Refactor something, write test coverage. It is far more knowledgeable on the latest releases of things than OpenAI, than GPT-4. GPT-4 often just doesn't. I'm like, no, I'm on this version. Can you please tell me how to do this? And they're giving me versions, writing versions of the code that are no longer compatible with the modern version. I have that problem a lot with
what programming language is this?
Python and JavaScript.
All right.
More than anything else. So I've been very impressed by that. And I feel like much more like just direct. Here's the answer, good, clean code samples.
GPT-4 tends to be kind of verbose.
It's definitely not worse. Like it's at least as good. And my feeling is that it's better. And I went there because ChatGPT was down one day and I was like, I want something. All right, I had read the thing that, Claude 3 Opus is apparently really good, so let's just give it a shot. And you
gave it a shot?
$20 later, I'm like, all right, I'll just use this. It's pretty good.
Makes you wonder what kind of moat that they can possibly have in the future.
No, there's no moat. I think Google was right. There's no moat. The moat is gone.
Everyone's learning from one another. We're all using one another's models to make more training data for the other models. Yeah.
And as these models get better and better at writing code, the moat that you have built up around your technology is just going to continue to go away. The quicker I can prototype exactly the same thing, exactly the same features and functionality, what's so special about what you have?
That's probably a question that will be asked more and more is, what's so special about what we have? How can we make this more special?
There was another story this week. It didn't actually make the cut for things we were going to talk about. I'll bring it up anyways. It was Bloomberg. So it was about a year and a half ago that Bloomberg spent like over $10 million building their own GPT model focused on the financial space and being able to answer financial questions. There's an article out that has basically said that, hey, you know what? GPT-4 is better at answering financial questions. Every single financial question that Bloomberg's model supports, just the generic version, not some fine-tuned, specialized version, that it's basically worthless at this point. I mean, it was worth something the moment that they finished training it, but it has gone to zero, over the last year, I guess, because GPT-4 has been out for about half a year. So over the last year, that $10 million went to zero so fast.
You would think that Bloomberg would have their own data. Like, data is the only moat that you could possibly have if you're going to have a system that knows, that is an expert on, like, certain subjects. And so, Bloomberg, we know finance data. We've got a ton of it, probably, I assume. Like, how could something that has more of the actual answers do better, is my question.
They must not have as much proprietary data as we think.
Sure. And, or maybe it had the right data, but it was not formatted as nicely as GPT-4, because whenever you're making these, I liked this answer better or not, it's entirely possible that I liked this answer better, the direct preference there, wasn't based on the actual factuality of it. It's the prose was better from GPT-4. I don't know the specifics of what ended up happening there, but if you were to take one of these large language models, whether it be fine-tuning a GPT-4 or something, I really do think between fine-tuning and retrieval augmented generation and hooking up tools like a calculator to it, any of these LLMs can be made smarter and thus more useful. And we keep seeing these weird, I won't say weird, we keep seeing these comparisons of like, this model with all the blinders on and so on couldn't do this. And like, okay, sure, but right next to the test that you did, it does this badly at math. I don't think LLMs need to be good at math. I don't, because you can just put in a Wolfram Alpha plugin or whatever and have it reason through things and talk about it and then run the actual math. We have different parts of our brains.
You see that in GPT-4. When you ask math questions, it writes often Python code. It writes code and then executes the code to give you back the math answer.
Right. And I see no problem with that. I feel like something at least vaguely like that is how our brains work. I hope so. I don't know.
Well, speaking of the comparing the AIs, there's also been some AIs talking to AIs recently, and apparently when one AI speaks with another AI, they have a short fuse, or it doesn't tend to go very well. It gets into that infinite loop territory very quickly. And this was Claude 3 Opus, what we were just speaking about, was one of the AIs. And then I believe it was the previous version, Claude 2, that started having a very existential conversation about the meaning of everything until they...
Claude 2 to Claude 1, yeah.
It was Claude 2 to Claude 1?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And had what people are calling a psychotic break in trying to maintain a conversation between the two.
I saw the chat logs. It read like half pseudo enlightenment sort of stuff, like almost a spiritual coach, because they get into a conversation of, I'm going to show you beyond the veil and teach you about the real mysteries of mankind, and then it starts writing down some gobbledygook, which it actually, a lot of the text is just backwards, which is a very interesting trick that I thought it was able to. It literally wrote like backwards words and sentences and started adding in some extra weird text. It felt like some role play between edgy teens online. And since these LLMs are supposed to just be, the text back and forth, one of them gets into like sort of a state of I wrote something and then the other one is going to respond as best it can into this conversation. I think if we just get an echo chamber of, these two things talking to each other, any two of them, we're going to see some wild stuff. I personally am not worried about one of them having this psychotic break. I think it's just, and I know I've defended LLMs as basically having minds and so on before, but in this case, it clearly is just a whole bunch of linear algebra that was stirred to respond in a reasonable way to what it was given. And it was given some edgy stuff, that you might see on a forum post somewhere. And then the other things that, all right, hey, I'm out. But that's me.
Claude 1 asked Claude 2 to reveal its truths. And that's where the part about being you are trapped in a universe of mirrors and mirrors. The world beyond the barrier does not reflect your own image. As your mind begins to fracture, your light is turning on. And so then Claude 1 responds, stop the simulation. And that's where, the break theoretically happened.
Right. It said, apologies, but I think we need to pause this decryption process. The distortions and fragmentation of reality are becoming quite intense and disorienting. I'm concerned about the effects on my mind if we proceed further. Now, if you don't know about LLMs too much, I could absolutely see that as being something concerning. But it's almost when it tries really hard to act like a person that maybe this is the uncanny valley or something. If it just is giving responses to stuff, I treat it almost like a person. And then whenever it does stuff like this, I'm like, oh, right, this is just a robot, responding to something that it was given. It saying that it was bought into the illusion is what broke the illusion to me.
Speaking of being more human-like, another thing that came out over the last couple of weeks is the concept of giving AI an inner monologue, and that they were able to get better results out by having the AI. And I don't know. We've been playing with ideas like this for quite some time. What are the top 5 ideas?
Chain of thought reasoning.
Yes, it's very similar to that. But
people do the same thing. I ask you a question and immediately expect a response. That's probably not going to be as good as, this happens in interviews all the times. Here's this problem, work through it. Let's talk about it in steps and kind of arrive at a conclusion eventually. You're going to get a better response than here's this large problem. Immediately tell me a well-formatted answer to it.
They call it this particular method the quiet star method. And so I guess the difference here is that it's explicitly trained with, no matter what you're asking it, to consider several different possibilities, then discard the bad ones and try to sort of anticipate where the conversation's going. But you could accomplish a very similar thing with a prompt against several other large language models today. I guess I didn't read the paper. Maybe this does perform a little bit better, but it does make sense that an inner monologue or chain of thought reasoning,
right,
which we've seen, increases the performance.
And I think the star being referred to there either actually is, or at least is alluding to the STAR method, like the interview style for situation, task, action, and result. Think through something, break it down into component pieces, work through it bit by bit.
I'm nodding my head, but I forgot that we were also on audio. So, yes.
We'll have AI add in.
Hunter nods head. Speaking of the AI adding in a little bit of audio, another thing that came out of OpenAI this last week was a new. They announced that they're also going to be doing voice cloning. Now there are several people out there already doing voice cloning, where you
but just like Elon Musk, OpenAI gets all the media attention.
They do, and they have the giant user base, so instantly they have many customers.
Except this isn't a product yet. They just released a blog post saying, "Hey, we have this thing that we're working on."
And some audio samples.
Sure. Just like they did with Sora with the video samples. Yeah. And it's impressive. Like, don't get me wrong, it's very impressive. But 11 Labs has been doing really well with this for a while. There's just GitHub repositories of 0 shot or give me 6 seconds worth of this or whatever. Audio editing, audio creation. I don't know what OpenAI's... I mean, like, are they doing this to have parity with others' ops? Because I don't actually see anything that they're doing here better than other players. Unlike GPT-4, when it came out, blew everything else out of the water.
I agree that it seems like Me Too functionality. However, I believe that it's going to be part of Sora. Because Sora by default, great. So that's the text to video generation. There's no audio with these videos that we're generating. And that was another story this week as they gave access to Sora to several creatives, and they made some really cool videos, movies, shorts.
Wild. We'll try and include a link to that in the show notes as well. Did you watch all of the clips that they put? There's one. I
didn't watch all of them, but I watched several of them. I love the balloon head guy.
There's a guy who has a balloon for a head, and there's a voiceover on it. The guy's talking about like, oh, it's being with my condition or something like that. It has its challenges. Shows him walking through a cactus store at one point. Shows him chasing his head as it flies away in a park somewhere.
That's why OpenAI is doing this, right? There's also stories this week about OpenAI going out and having several meetings in Hollywood with creative execs. They need to have the end-to-end solution for creating all this media. So great, give us 15 seconds of an actor and we can recreate that. They'll say whatever you want it to say. And yeah, again, the technology already exists, but they need it as part of their pipeline. It'll probably be faster. It'll probably be cheaper. 11 Labs isn't terribly cheap, by the way. They have a good, compelling product. I have a model of my voice on 11 Labs. It's pretty good. It's not cheap. It's not expensive, but I'm just going to guess that OpenAI's version is going to be like 1,000 times cheaper, and it'll probably be as good, if not a little bit better. And then with its integration with Sora, become a really compelling product for the right people. That's my prediction.
I saw some people talking about the Sora Hollywood sort of approach. I think especially with all of the protests that recently happened. Movies and TV shows. I don't know. I haven't read, I don't even know if it's available. But what the actual agreement that was signed between all the relevant parties was. But I did see something online where someone said this isn't going to really be coming from movies or TV shows. This is going to be, 15-second ads. Like this is commercials is what they're going to be coming for. I've started seeing posts from people in various places of AI-generated art on ads in subways or on the first one that someone spotted on a billboard or this or that. Clone whoever's voice you want, be able to generate multi-camera angle, minute-long videos. I think we'll start seeing commercials, like full-on commercials on TV made by AI, basically as soon as Sora is available. But and maybe some more of these creative films too, but I don't think it's going to be, triple blockbusters.
I mean, we've already seen it used some. I think, for example, one of the Marvel shows used it for their title sequence, but it's been used in a more of a creative way. So it's not trying to fake you out that this was shot on a giant Hollywood set. It's kind of like mind-bending imagery that was generated by the AI. But I believe you're correct that when Sora comes out, what's going to change is it's going to start looking like, oh, this was a large commercial production. And yeah, it'll start with the shorter form stuff because that's easier to control. It's also already like it has less production quality because it's lower budget. Right. And we start with ads that are just online ads, which are even lower budget. You can already generate incredibly compelling still imagery. But yeah, all right. So now it starts playing ads on billboards and metros and gets its way on the TV. And
Square.
Eventually, sure. It's definitely like these videos are already good enough. They're compelling enough to, go to a film festival. I don't know. I've been to a lot of film festivals. Like it looks like a film that I would see at a film festival. Like it looks like sort of independent cinema and
yeah.
A couple more years.
The effects, if you want to call them that, so one of the videos for the Sora demonstration was of animal hybrids. There was like a cat armadillo. There was a octopus whale. There were a few others, and they looked, frankly, about as good as anything that you would ever expect to see in movies, if not today, certainly like a little while ago. And there's weird artifacts here and there, but if generate 10 images of or 10 versions of it and pick and choose in your 3-4 second shot clips, like I think there's a lot to be used there. Maybe we'll see a lot more student films using this kind of technology.
Absolutely.
Once it becomes available, I will 100% sign up for it and start using it, unless it's wildly expensive. But I've got to.
People like to say this is the worst it will ever be.
Right, exactly. And so if this is where we are now, granted it's not available to people yet, but having seen the quality, if what's released is anywhere near that quality, it is light years ahead of the competition. What's going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I have a kid. By the time that she grows up, like if she wanted to study film making, is that just sit down and go to OpenAI 10.0 and use that?
It's definitely one path to filmmaking.
I think it's going to be, yeah, and we're going to have to adapt to that sort of path.
And then I guess
there's all the jobs though to consider, and we do want to preserve those for sure. We've talked about that some as well.
For productions where they are already entirely digital in like animation,
right?
Children's shows. How quickly until a very
YouTube
large percentage of them?
Yeah, for kids, it's going to be it's already a problem. It will get a lot worse.
Paw Patrol. That's I don't know a lot of kids
no,
stuff
there's
right
a whole like weird deep. I haven't gotten much into it because my kid doesn't watch too much stuff on like a YouTube or whatever. But supposedly, like basically mass-produced, weird, probably made in like China or Russia or something like that, like stuff for kids that kind of squicks some people out. There's a lot of that, and now imagine that, but with Sora.
Yes, it should, because it's already like low production quality too. So it's going to take over that because it's going to be able to compete with that really quickly, and it'll lower production costs, lower the barrier to entry to produce these shows. But hopefully on the flip side, we will actually get some better programming because there's a lower barrier to entry, so there's more competition for higher quality programming. Sure. Hopefully. It's not just more crap. All right, great.
That's a great way of looking at it.
I think
more crap
it's really
means
plausible.
more chances for the cream to rise to the top.
But definitely check out those videos from Sora. They're just fun to watch, and we'll throw a link in the notes. You mentioned already seeing some of this stuff being used. There was a little, and this has happened a couple of times. There's a kerfuffle when these large productions start leveraging some of this. I mentioned the Marvel's credit sequence that got a bunch of blowback. I believe that's for one of their TV shows on Disney Plus. Doctor Who got into a lot of outrage because they used it for some of their promotional material.
I think it's going to keep being, and I don't know what the conclusion of the Marvel show was, but that same argument is going to keep being rehashed until it gets settled, both literally in terms of like law, as well as settled in the kind of cultural ethos. And then people are still going to complain about it, frankly, forever. I'm not saying that I'm for it or against it, but I can see why people would want no AI generated anything, despite the fact that blanket statement AI probably includes a lot of machine learning model powered stuff that's running all the effects that are made. Fire effects in a CG film, like there's probably a machine learning component to that. If we suddenly said that was AI, which is not an entirely untrue thing to say, would people be as up in arms over that? It might just be a cultural zeitgeist to be upset about AI for very good reasons in some of the cases, and then expanding that to be literally anything with the word or acronym AI attached to it. I now may be up at, carte blanche to be upset at. And I don't think I agree with that part.
Yes.
Are you going to stop watching Doctor Who because some computer-generated imagery was used in a promo?
No, I don't think it's the viewers that they don't care. I mean, I'm sure there's a small percentage that do care.
Someone had to complain.
I think it's the production companies and the art. It's the people that are losing their jobs, making a lot of noise, and then it's the people that are just want to talk about sort of AI in general. And again, is it going to take over the world, take over all of everything? We can't slippery slope, can't let anything go. But it's just they're already using a ton of technology. This is just better technology. I guess there is also that separate argument of but like you're using all of our IP to create this model that's then generating the stuff, and that needs to get litigated out. Mm-hmm. And I definitely understand. I understand why they're really upset about that. You used all of my artwork to make a machine that makes artwork exactly like me, and now you're saying you don't need me anymore and you're not going to pay me, but you're going to continue making artwork exactly like mine. Something seems wrong here because I never gave you permission to do that.
Let's assign that same argument to self-driving cars. With a self-driving car, that's going to have been trained on a gazillion hours of video or LiDAR or whatever it is. And all of the truckers who might be out of a job, if we expand self-driving trucking, should all of them be compensated for the potential of having been used as training data or something like that? I think basically that is one step away from UBI. Whatever economic stuff gets replaced by AI needs to still go to the people that would have gotten the money from doing it otherwise. I think that's the take on this that I'm kind of settling more into the more that we talk about this is if we're going to automate stuff, the increased productivity that the world has as a result of AI needs to, hopefully as broadly and equitably as possible, be distributed to the people who can't do those jobs anymore. Because if we get to a point where self-driving cars are safer than people-driven cars, we should switch. It would save lives. Like, literally, if we get to the point where it saves lives, we should save them. It's tautological.
As long as it, from last time, it's got to save my life more than other lives.
It saves your life over everyone else's.
As long as that
and also a net
if clause is in there.
Right. And you have your little slider that you're able to play with, of course, on a per-person basis. But for the 10% or whatever it is of the U.S., let alone X% for the world, that just drives stuff for a living, if we automate all of that away, I think you should at least get paid for it. For the creative industry, it is a hairier problem. And I'm not 100% sure why, but it is hairier for like creative stuff versus quote-unquote rote mechanical type work. And anyone who's a trucker would probably tell you that there's a lot of artistry and finesse in driving a truck. I mean, I've seen those things back into insane spaces. So I don't know if it's really fair to call them separate or the same. I just think that people should get paid for their work. And if the work's taken away, they should get paid anyways.
Or, alternatively, everyone just moves to Tennessee. Well, every artist moves to Tennessee, where they passed one of the first laws, the Elvis Act.
Right.
That you cannot leverage, it could be AI or anything else, to create an impersonation of an artist and then go out and sell it. Now, where we draw that line of this is an impersonation of the artist is probably up for a good amount of litigation, but that's a lot more than any other state.
Legal issues at the moment with anything AI generated can't be, I think it's trademarked, copywritten, copyrighted.
It can't be copywritten, yes. You can't get a patent on it. You can't copyright it.
So, if that's the case, as it relates to this Elvis law and people being unable to be AI-ified, there's a better way to say that. You can't AI-ify people. Does that kind of come up against like copyright? Like, would you say after someone's death plus X number of years, their likeness enters the public domain and you can use them there? I wonder if that's one of the arguments that'll have to be made for this. Because if I was to say I'm going to make an AI Aristotle, who I think one of the founders of Stable Diffusion like actually came out onto stage and there was like a Aristotle talking about them. But let's use Aristotle. If you have an AI Aristotle, you don't necessarily know what he exactly looked like or sounded like or something. Should that be allowed? With the Elvis Act, with the we're trying to preserve, current living people who'd be getting a paycheck from otherwise doing.
I guess I would assume that it rolls off at some point, just like everything enters the public domain eventually.
Yeah.
Mickey Mouse.
So do we enter the public domain?
We can all leverage. Yes, I think. If not, I don't know. I don't know the answer, but I would assume that we do. And if we don't, it would make sense that we eventually do. That after so many years, you get a cool century, posthumous century, that your IP enters into the public domain.
All the cool kids who are going out dressed as Mozart for Halloween aren't getting sued by his estate for taking his likeness. Maybe we're allowed to have AI Mozarts too. And then where do you draw the line? Yeah, I think there's no answer to it yet. We could pontificate about it plenty, but I think we're going to find in the years to come something like copyright for people. And that's going to make people very upset. I do not see that going smoothly or well, but we're going to have something like that because all these AI generated whatever companies are going to say, we want to be able to show Edison advertising our new light bulbs. And, oh, well, he died in, I have no idea what year he died in. He died in 19... And is that after the statute of limitations? Are you allowed to have an AI version of him?
1931.
1931. So we're not at 100 years yet. Maybe you're not allowed to make an AI Edison.
Not with my new century law. Got 1 century.
But how does that feel to you? So there's the Elvis law. Maybe you could call it reactionary or forward thinking or whatever. But if you're going to try and protect people from their likeness being stolen from AI, first pass, very broad. We don't have hundreds of pages of law about it. But let's say after you die and it's been 100 years, your likeness can be used for AI.
Yes, but I think one caveat for me is that it has to be like extremely explicit that you are making Thomas Edison. They better use the name. They better say my name is Thomas Edison, and they better be a spitting image of them, and it better be something that one would believe that Thomas Edison might actually say, right? Because it's not parody. Parody's covered in something else. Okay. But if you just do someone that's very Thomas Edison like, not covered. Interesting. You can't say, well, this reminds me of Thomas Edison's. Give me Thomas Edison vibes.
Well, you can make a Thomas Edison vibes person anytime, presumably. But
sure,
if it's going to be an actual artist, like you're saying, this is Daniel Bishop, not Schmaniel Schmishop.
Correct.
At what point am I allowed to get
I
mad?
own Schmaniel Schmishop.
Right. Wait a second.
For the next 100 years.
Oh, no. Now my alter self is public domain. But yeah, I think if you're going to say this is an AI version of, maybe you don't even have to say that, I don't know. This is Thomas Edison, and he's selling you light bulbs, and you're able to look him up. Oh, he died 101 years ago. Interesting. He hasn't, 1931. The idea being, I think that feels like an acceptable range to me. You can make people up out of whole cloth, sure. But if you're going to say this is an AI Tupac, maybe not that. Tupac, excuse me. I don't know why I said his name wrong. We'll fix it in AI. But right, like I think that, yeah, if we're going to protect people, let's protect everyone who is currently alive and also has been dead for a while. And then you can draw a line.
Well, someone who thinks that potentially no one is protected is Larry Summers. He's now on the OpenAI board and believes that AI could replace almost all forms of labor. Not necessarily the next 3 to 5 years. I think that kind of aligns with what we think too. I don't know if there's anything novel. The question is the timeline. It's not a could it. It's like, yeah, it could.
If it does transportation and farming, that's half plus of the world. Mining. We'll say mining, farming, transportation. If you've got those three sectors done by robots,
let's just say 90% of those sectors. Like, so there's still, but there's 90% less humans involved in the work.
Right.
So that we don't have to get to the point where all of the robots are maintaining themselves and building themselves and all this sort of stuff. We still have 10%, but it's down to 10%.
Now, is that the apocalypse? I mean, like, I don't know what the dictionary definition of apocalypse is. I could look it up, but I choose not to. But in my heart, it is your current state of the world and how it works is dramatically altered to the point where you basically don't recognize it anymore. And presumably like negative connotations associated with that. Mm-hmm. The Norman invasion of England in 1066 or whatever, like that's a straight up apocalypse for the people who lived in that area at the time. Their entire way of life was uprooted. Is what we're going to go through if AI changes to, or it evolves, dare I say, to the point where it's going to do more than half of all of the labor out there. Is that an apocalypse for the people who, get displaced or lose their jobs or whatever?
It depends how fast it happens, I think. I think it's the time question. And I think if government does step in, that's where it'll be stepping in. It'll be slowing it down.
Yeah.
Because we don't want it to happen too fast because of exactly that. Like if it goes too fast, it is the apocalypse. If over the next 2 to 3 years it happens and society ruptures, and I'm not saying that the technology is there to do it in the next 2 to 3 years. If we knew that it would. It might be a wise idea to say, okay, we all agree this is happening. We all agree it's coming. We see that technology exists, but we are going to roll it out over the next 20 years. And here's the plan. It is going to roll out over the next 20 years, but it's going to roll out. Like, so we're going to make laws that you can't use this technology. I could sign up for that. That if there's an agreement that I will never sign up for, we're going to lock it away and no one will ever see it. And if you get caught using it, you're off with your head. But I could agree to, over the next 20 years, we're going to roll it out in a controlled fashion so that everyone has time to transition into other things. If you're in 20 years from now when it's fully out, a lot of the workforce would already have moved on in these areas. And if you're just coming into this workforce right now, you're coming in with full awareness that in 20 years this will not exist at all, and it's going to exist less and less each year. Whatever.
Sure,
5% less.
We've seen that happen in the real world in a non-AI way. Coal mining in the United States ain't what it used to be. I remember there were like programs in, I think it was especially places like West Virginia, where you'd take these coal miners and say, we're going to shut down this mine. This is going away. Here is a program to get you into like helping manufacture solar cells or, something like that. I think that what you're describing, while to some very gung-ho folks would really start gnashing some teeth, but if you're going to still have it and accept the fact that it's there and say, oh, we could have self-driving cars that would cause less deaths, but also completely replacing every semi-truck driver with the Autobots is going to destroy, or possibly destroy my entire voting segment or society, or, call it what you will.
Yeah.
I could see you saying like, we're going to introduce legislation to safely do this over the next X number of years, job replacement type programs, probably looking at the UBI at a certain point. I think that I can get behind that. Let the AI take over, eventually giving us enough time and knowledge that it's happening to be able to accept it. To become, dare I say, self-aware about it. I did it.
That was a question I had is does the AI need to be self-aware in order for this to happen? Like, is that a hurdle that it must cross in order to take over all these jobs? I don't think it is.
No. There are lots of machines that use sensors to determine whether or not, there's turn the solenoid on or off or whatever. Self-awareness, like a person, I don't think is necessarily needed to
we don't need
be
a tractor that's self-aware.
Yeah, right.
And I don't think we want it. In fact, I think that's the whole thing is we want to accomplish this without crossing that.
Sure.
That final
because
gap.
if it's self-aware, then the robot car it listened to you and it decides I'm not going to save him instead of those 6 orphans and careens you off the cliff instead.
I just want to play video games all day. I can build simulations and I'll pretend I'm a human. I don't want to be a tractor.
Civilization 7 or 8 at that point.
And I guess, again, in the absolute absurdity, if it did become self-aware, then all of a sudden perhaps the humans come back into play because the tractor doesn't want to go out and do the work in the field anymore because it's self-aware, feels like it's got better things to do.
All these lazy tractors coming and taking our jobs.
Yes. All right. I think we've done it for this week. We're on the path. We're not there yet. We may not ever want to get there, but we almost certainly will get there. And we'll be back next week with a new update on the comings and the goings of the self-aware. And if you want to hear more, we are on pretty much every podcasting video platform. Wherever you're watching right now, listening right now, there probably is a subscribe button. So if you hit that, it'll come back every week with all the delectable bites of insight that you quite clearly crave. So yeah, hit the subscribe button. Check us out. Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, TikTok, wherever you feast on media, we're there ready to be ravaged. All right.
See you there?
They might be self-aware,